You can't have a cohesive team when you're all in three different systems and three different email platforms and phone systems together. So this first 6 months of the year has really been about integration.
This is the Staying Power Podcast, a show that explores the challenges business owners face as they grow. I'm Brandon Hall.
And I'm Thomas Castelli.
And together we ask the tough questions to show you that running a business is not for the faint of heart. But if you have staying power, you'll overcome your challenges and achieve lasting success.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for tuning into this episode of the Staying Power Podcast. Brendan Hall and I are joined here today with Joshua Driskell, managing partner of Lagerlof, a law firm that has been involved in shaping the legal and business landscape in Southern California for more than 100 years. Today, Joshua shares his secrets on growing through mergers and acquisitions and the challenges he faced along the way, including the acquisition process, culture and fit, people, systems, buying into the idea of a remote workforce, and much more. Josh, thanks for taking the time to come on the show today. Would you be able to give our listeners a little information on your background?
Sure. So my name is Josh Driskell. I'm a tax, business, and estate attorney practicing in the Los Angeles area, specifically Pasadena. Licensed in another state as well, Ohio. That's actually where I grew up and went to school, college, law school. Practiced in Ohio for a few years and made my way out west for a law firm that I was working for that was expanding. And came out to California and opened an office for them. And about a year into that, I really decided to go out on my own and partner up with another attorney here locally that I had gotten to know, and we became good referral friends and partners in that way. And kind of walked into his office and said, "Hey, why don't we partner up? What do we have to lose?" Right? And that's how all great partnerships are born and started, of course. And we put our employees together and joined our computers up on the network. And the next day, we were partners in law. Since then, things have grown, which has been great, and it's been a really wild ride. I live in the Pasadena area too. It's a great community, awesome suburb of LA, and I'm loving it.
That's awesome. And we understand that you went through what appears to be a pretty large merger of a few different law firms over the last year or 6 months or so.
Yeah.
How did that merger ended up coming into fruition in the first place?
Yeah. So interesting. So even back my first law firm that I worked for, and I worked in kind of corporate America a little bit before going to law school and actually during law school right at the beginning. And I always had a plan to go into the corporate route, never really be a practicing attorney like I am today, more, in-house, real estate focused, at a corporation. That was the dream. And ultimately changed course on that right as I started law school for various reasons. Probably the easiest reason to explain is my job was downsized where I worked, and I had opportunity to move to other states that I had no interest moving to. And I just said, okay, let's go all in on law. So graduated from law school in 2011. It was not a great time to come out of law school or any professional school, really. And this was in Ohio. So this was right at the time that the city I was in, which was Toledo, was, Forbes top 5 worst cities in the country to live in type thing. On third year running type of deal. So it was not exactly the best place to be, but I luckily got an amazing first year job at a small boutique tax business law firm. And they liked the fact that I had the MBA, and they liked that I had, worked in corporate settings that really helped kind of talk to their clients. So I got a job there. And that firm was really unique in that it had, a law and an accounting practice built in. The owner of the firm was a JD CPA. And we did we did about 1,500 to 2,000 tax returns a year, which is a lot for a law firm. And I got thrown right into it. I took one tax class in law school, the class that I was required to take, of course, and otherwise had no tax experience other than some of my MBA classes. I, of course, faked it and said, of course, I'll help with all these tax related matters and I can review tax returns. So got thrown right into that. And really enjoyed it and kind of fell in love with tax in a lot of ways. The other big piece of that was the tax accounting practice, like I talked about. And the attorney, the owner, really grew that through acquisition of smaller tax practices. And almost immediately, I got kind of to be the subject matter expert of these acquisitions. So I would be the one when he would identify a target, so to speak, and he'd say, "Hey, I just bought this small tax practice 25 minutes from here. We need to bring all the clients in." And, I would help with the integration on the technology side. How do we get, silly stuff like, okay, he's on Drake and we're on Pro Series or whatever, right? That kind of spearhead that piece, which is not exactly a legal role, but more of the managerial side. So I would do all of that, and I would help, make sure that we had a transition plan for clients and all those things. I just saw how it was done. It clicked with my MBA side, right? I could see the acquisition as a really interesting way of acquiring additional clients, because I also helped out a lot on the marketing side. My MBA has a focus in marketing. So I was spending time marketing and, paying pay-per-click or whatever we were doing at that time and seeing, kind of mixed results, at least at that point. And then I would see 1,500 clients come in, or 500 clients rather, come in to, overnight by this acquisition. To me, it was like, okay, that's a really interesting way to grow, particularly a professional practice like a CPA practice or a law firm. So I did probably 5 or 6 of those while I worked there, and including while I was, being an attorney in California, and continued to work on that type of work, and then moved into my own practice and sort of started to look at that kind of model almost immediately. Law firms are traditionally not as rich of a target for merger or acquisition than CPA firms. CPAs have had a long history of doing that kind of thing. And, there's a repeatable business model, and the clients tend to come back unless you really screw stuff up and all that kind of thing. So law is different, or it can be different. I think we're proving that it doesn't have to be that different. So we've done that. I've done the acquisition several times of small law firms. These are usually attorneys that are ready to retire. One law firm we actually bought out of an estate, and it was an estate planning attorney's practice, actually. And we bought that practice out of his estate from his trust and became his practice administrator under the state bar. And, that was about 2,000 clients that came in overnight. And we're sort of waiting on, that work kind of drips in just as it comes in, and clients call the old number that we bought. And it's like, hey, he's passed away, but we're here and we can help you. That was a little different than those have been kind of small. This most recent change, which really resulted in the Lagerlof merger, which is where I'm practicing today, that really was a much longer process and a much longer thing to put together, because that was kind of 2 equally sized law firms at different places in their kind of overall trajectory. We were really sort of young and like being old, being a corporation. We started our firm, John and myself started in 2014. And we've started just, doing it as an organic growth. Lagerlof as an entity started in 1908 and is the second oldest law firm in LA County. So very different sort of firms from that perspective. Tons of synergies though in our practice areas. The culture of the people was the same or very similar. And their goal was to really find a team to hitch themselves to transition to the next generation. It was very important to them that their clients not be left in the lurch, and that there was a plan for transitioning them. In many cases, this firm had served 3 and 4 generations of the same family. And for it to have just an overnight change to say, hey, go call Josh Driskell at then Plymouth Driskell and Terzian, wasn't probably going to be what they wanted to do. And they had their kind of pick of merger partners in a way. There were several people that were really looking at them as an option. And I think, and we can probably talk about this, we really provided an interesting platform for them, because they could see what we were doing on the tech side and how we were growing the business. And I think they really saw that as an attractive option. We certainly saw it as a way to generate a huge number of influx of new clients over time. All of them still practice for us today. We didn't lose any attorneys in that transition. We didn't want to lose any attorneys in that transition. We wanted to really capitalize on their team. So that's sort of how it started, was from that kind of doing that acquisition phase all the way to seeing merger and acquisition as a really interesting way of growing our practice.
So before we dive deeper into this specific merger, I want to ask you about the acquisitions piece. It seems like you have really good experience there. So what do you typically look for in an acquisition target? Like, what makes a target company a really good pick to go out and try to acquire?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, regardless of how much money they're making, the person that you're acquiring or you're merging with, or however it's chosen to be structured, even from a marketing perspective, however it's talked about, that person's got to be on the same page. I've done enough of these to be able to spot when somebody's not ready to change or not ready to transition over. And sometimes that's okay, but that has to be the expectation and the understanding, because, if a lot of us, if we're acquiring a firm, we pretty much say, okay, we're acquiring everything, all of our decisions, whatever you did in the past doesn't matter. And this is what we're going to, you're going to answer the phone this way starting on Monday. That works for some people, and that's exactly what they want. They literally want to just be hands off and say, all I do is tax returns now, or all I do is legal work now. I don't want to think about the business. And we've done those types of acquisitions. And then we've also done some that say, hey, I've got 5 years left. I kind of want to be left alone for the most part. I want to keep a lot of my procedures and processes in place. And I just want to sort of operate under your support. And then when I'm ready to be done, I'm going to just peace out one day, drop the mic, and it's all going to be yours. We've done both of those. Both can work. You just have to know which one you're doing. And you can do two of them at the same time that way, but you just have to structure them differently, and the way that you deal with them are different. At the same time, we did the Lagerlof merger. We did one with a smaller law firm that was kind of a related entity in a way. We treat even those two a little bit differently because of the way that they were structured and how those partners that were coming from that firm wanted to go forth. So you can do them, from what you're looking for as an acquisition target. I think first and foremost is fit and an understanding of what they want, for sure.
How do you identify these acquisition targets? And then how do you proceed with going through the motions of trying to see if they're ready to sell? I mean, you just like calling people up and saying, do you want to sell your practice? Or is there a big relationship component to this?
That's a good question. I've never called anybody up and said, do you want to sell? Although I don't see an issue with that. And I know that that's been done absolutely on the accounting side in the firms that I've dealt with acquiring from my past firms. I think though, the best result is going to come from you putting yourself in a position to talk to people that are going to be in a logical place to want to sell or want to have a merger in the future. It's a regular practice for me to to be very connected with other managing partners in this area that I'm in Pasadena, but also in other areas that I want to eventually expand into. One of our goals is to get out into, we're in Southern California. A lot of our clients leave LA and go to Palm Springs, or they leave LA and go to Santa Barbara or Orange County. There's sort of these different directions that they sometimes go. It's a goal of ours to be in those places too. So I'm regularly communicating with partners and potential targets in those locations. And target sounds really cold, and acquisition sounds really cold, and all of that. These are, no matter what it's called, it really is a merger, even if it's not a legal merger, right? Because you're bringing this team, you're bringing this culture in. And, an acquisition is really just, the only time we've ever phrased it as an acquisition, or it's ever been one, is really the one out of the estate, because the person was deceased and there wasn't an opportunity to make it more of a merger or more of a friendly scenario. You need, in my opinion, the person who's involved in the practice on a day-to-day basis, you need them for a period of time, because especially in the CPA world, which is where I have, a lot of experience too, and it's a little more transactional. You get the letter, and the letter says, hey, your practice is, I'm retiring, or I'm slowing down, or I've merged with this firm, or whatever. And it's an opportunity for your client to look around for pricing generally anyway. So you need that person on and around for a period of time to be able to call those clients up, make sure they transition, make sure that there's a good kind of handover. Otherwise, it's going to potentially end in disaster. It's the same thing in law or any professional service. You've got to have that person sort of driving the boat about what's in it for the client too. So that's why it's really advantageous to have them around.
Have you ever gone through a failed merger?
Not a failed merger where we got that far, but I've definitely spent time on a transaction that didn't ultimately merge or ultimately turn into anything. And yeah, it's disappointing, but I think ultimately the best result will happen. These should not be forced. It should align, right? It's just like anything, if it's not like you're buying a car and you're just trying to force the salesman down in price to a place where you can do it. You're going into business with this person, even if it is somebody who's going to completely retire, because there's so much back and forth kind of, at least in that first 6 months, of things that you're going to need or didn't anticipate. So yeah, I've definitely gone through the process, and also with the CPA firms where we were doing all the due diligence piece and, just didn't work out for whatever reason. It's usually around that person. Every time it's always sort of been around the key decision makers not being at that place to let go yet. And it's probably always stemmed back from that first thing I talked about, which is what kind of acquisition or merger is this? Is this one where they want to be out, or is this one where they need to transition in? And if you're on the wrong track than they are, that's where you're going to run into trouble, I think.
Good stuff. So switching back to the most recent merger, your law firm is young, growing. This law firm is, I don't want to say old. I think that's a mischaracterization, but they've been around since the early 1900s.
Yeah, they have a long history.
And so you're similar sizes. What were some of the challenges you faced merging together as one law firm?
Well, space was one of them, and that's probably the most on my mind right now because we're in 3 different office locations, all within a 5-minute walk of each other. That's obviously very inefficient. We built this space in 2017 that I'm in, and I designed it and worked with it, and it's kind of my baby. And they, of course, have their space that they've been in for 20 years. And it's a very nice space, built very differently, however, because it was built 20 years ago when you did things like marble on the floors and wood columns and all sorts of things. And clients don't want to see that today. Typically, one, it's not really in fashion. And secondly, they just don't want to see it because they think it means you're overcharging them. So that was a kind of a struggle. So really looked at what we do to get everybody under one roof because I think it's very important. You can't have a cohesive team when you're all in 3 different systems and 3 different email platforms and phone systems together. So this first 6 months of the year has really been about integration. And actually, one of our offices today is integrating a server. We're doing a server move and a phone system move today at one of our locations. So our office manager's there today dealing with that. I haven't seen anything blow up yet, so that's good. But getting them all on one page has been really, really important from a systems perspective. We're also in the midst of construction right now on a new space that will house all of us in one building. I chose to relocate us all to a unique building that no one has ever worked in. That to me was symbolic of a change. I think if we took any one of our buildings, even if it was a different floor, it would always feel sort of like somebody's turf. I didn't want that. So we chose a building that didn't have any connection to any of our buildings other than it was owned by the same landlord as our current building, which allowed us to do some, release of one space for a more expensive and larger space at another building. It gave us also an opportunity to cut square footage. I hacked about 6,000 square feet off of our overall footprint. We still have 20,000 square feet, which is still big, but we're a lot more efficiently built than we otherwise were with the other 3 offices. So those have been the big key things that have been sort of happening right now. It's really about that integration piece so that, everybody won't feel really together until we're all in that same kind of boat rowing in the same direction to me.
So I'm sure we're going to circle back on the office component in a second, but a question that I have for you is, there's all different types of systems people are on, right? Like you might just, for the tax world, this is just how I could see it right now, but say like you have someone who's using CCH and you have someone who's using Pro Series or Ultra Tax, whatever the case is, when a merger or acquisition occurs. How important is it to all get on the same system and use the same system as a firm-wide, or can you manage with people using different systems?
Yeah, so you can manage with people using different systems for a short period of time. If we take it back to the tax world, right? I mean, imagine if you're trying to get help from one of your colleagues on a tax return and they don't have the software to look at it. Right. And it's like, okay, well, I did this return in Pro Series, you're in CCH. Yeah. At the end of the day, it spits out the same tax return, but they're not really able to just open it up and look at it instantly and be like, yeah, you got a -1 in the wrong space. Right. So in this situation, it's the same thing. The matter management system and time and billing systems and the document management systems, can you manage without them? Sure, because they were already being managed without them. They were separate entities, but that's the thing. They were separate, and that's why it worked. Now, if you're going to tout collaboration between your teams, and if collaboration and talent and that kind of thing is the key to this merger and why you did it, then you've got to be on separate systems. If they're mergers of 2 different manufacturing plants and one's manufacturing, metal spindle gears and one's manufacturing shampoo, it's probably not that important that they're on the same system because those 2 are independent lines that aren't talking to each other. Maybe the finance systems need to be combined and those types of things, but there might be a use case for leaving things separate. In professional services, the product that's being sold is the time of the professionals. The best way to deal with that is to be to efficiently let those people practice and to get collaboration. So I think it's critical. It doesn't need to be done on day one, but there has to be a plan to ultimately get over to one system.
Yeah, but Josh, I've been using the same system for a decade, and I've got it all down. I know exactly what to do when I come in, and I know exactly how to operate. And all of a sudden you're telling me I got to switch.
Yep.
How do you deal with that?
Yeah, that's tough. That can be really tough for people. And that takes us back to step one, which is a fit culturally and a fit mindset wise. Because if everybody's on the same page of why this merger is happening, then everybody's accepting of the fact that some system's going to change somewhere and something's going to change somewhere. If you are just shotgunning this thing and making it happen and just shoving it down people's throats, this is the first of many roadblocks that you're going to just trip over. And it's going to be a major problem. This has to be sort of discussed at the beginning. It's not like you need to make a decision in the first meeting, but you have to say, hey, look, first 6 months, we have to get everybody on one system. We're going to identify which systems they are, and we're going to standardize. In every acquisition or merger we've done, we've always brought people over to our systems. And when I say our systems, I mean the systems that were in use at my office, the former Driskell and Terzian office. In this situation, we actually looked more closely at each one of those applications to make sure it was still the right fit. This was a big enough transition, and I felt that this was going to propel us into the next kind of generation or level, that I wanted to make sure that the systems we had in place were going to support us, 100 plus people kind of thing. And we did the analysis, we put the team together, and the answer ultimately was yes, that we're going to stay with the software program that we have. And partly that was because when I built those systems out to begin with, I knew they were oversized for the firm that we had, but I knew what we were going to be building. It wasn't as though we had outpaced that equipment. The result that I wanted actually occurred. But there are some systems some ancillary systems or some smaller scale systems that we're going and using their program for, because it actually is better. So you just have to do the analysis and look and see, and everybody has to be open to it. It was going to be expensive either way. It didn't matter what the cost was, but you got to look at, training costs and all that kind of stuff behind the scenes and how much data is in there and all that.
The systems can definitely make your practice more efficient, can help with growth and eliminate a lot of pain points. But especially in a merger, how do you train people on the ultimate system that you want them to run? And how do you ensure that they keep going down that same road, right? How do you make sure that they actually stay on the system that you want them to be on, or on that process that you want them to be on?
Yeah. So there's a couple ways. One, which is new to us, and I'm really excited about it. We're in the process of interviewing for an IT and e-learning manager for the firm as a whole, which is a new role for us. We've never had this person, but I think they're critical. So each of your vendors will train your staff, right? They've got to, if you got Pro Series, if you're in a CPA, they'll give you a webinar, they'll jump on a call, they'll tell you what to do. There's videos, same thing in legal, all of that. Does anybody watch them? No. They don't. I mean, they're there, but nobody watches it. It just doesn't happen. I think we're kidding ourselves if we say that these people will watch these videos. So the IT learning manager for us is really going to be a twofold position. It's going to, one, sort of troubleshoot some minor IT issues that just are not enough to open a ticket on. Somebody can solve very, very quickly with our then going to our outside vendor. The primary objective of this person and the real role that they're going to play is the e-learning side, which is consistent training of our staff on all the software that we have and all of the systems that we have. And also working with each of those, whether it be a partner or an attorney or whoever, down to reception, for what process or procedure or software can we bring in place that will make your job easier, more efficient, make you a better collaborator with the rest of the team. And that to me is key, because we are going to have a significant number, about 40 people or so, coming onto a new platform that they've never used. Will the vendor train? Yeah, they will, but you need somebody in-house that can just really understand the software, know what it can do, know its best practices, and just sort of help everybody get there. Then once that kind of baseline is done, it's really going to be about pushing to the next generation. We use some really cool software that's got some AI components in it. We have not even begun to scratch the surface of what that can do. It's an expensive software, for us and most professional services firms, at least the ones that are paying attention to this. It's going to go payroll, rent, technology. And we do a lot to get money out of our staff. We do a lot to get money out of our buildings, but a lot of times we just buy the software and hope people use it. In this situation, we really want to push adoption and we want to push understanding of the software because it's expensive. I mean, you're spending a lot on tech. That's how we're going to solve for it and really try to have somebody in-house that can be on a regular training cycle.
Got it. So you're trying to push the software adoption and you've got somebody that's going to be dedicated to this role. How do you make sure that people are actually going to adopt it though? At what point are you just like, look, it's either you do it this way or...
Oh, so how do you force people to use it? Yeah. So that's always tough. There's the gentle ways that you do that, right? So we have a document management system. And we have, for example, let's say we have a new attorney that's drafting everything in Word and they're just saving it to their desktop locally and then they're sending me documents. This has happened this week, actually. So I can give you a perfect real life example. We want everything in our document management system. That's the system of record. That's where I want your stuff. That's where I look for your stuff. That's how I know you're doing your job, right? In my mind, right? I see things happening in the document management system. So this attorney, great attorney, doing a great job. I know that they like to draft their documents in Word Online for some weird reason, whatever. I don't get it, but that's what they do. And saves it to the firm's OneDrive or SharePoint site, which is fine. I can ultimately get to that if I need to, like if this person's hit by a bus, but it's not as easy for me if they're in a document management system. So I've been constantly telling him, hey, make sure you save things in, World Docs and blah, blah, blah. Anyway, long story short, I get this email, say, hey, can you review this complaint? I'm ready to file it with the court. I'm like, nope, it's not in World Docs. I can't review it. Save it into World Docs, just things like that, right? Just stopping them, sending it back, even though I could have reviewed it and said, yeah, but hey, make sure you're saving this in World Docs. I said, no, I'm not going to review it until it's in World Docs and pushed back. That's kind of step one. If you can't get past that, if that doesn't work for most people, and that works for most people, then you shut it off, which I've done also. I've had to do that. Part of the reason we have a sophisticated document management system is that we couldn't get people to save things consistently in the directories. So every document had, you, Brandon and Thomas could have been working on the same exact thing for two different clients. You call it one thing, he calls it the other. I'm looking for the same thing in both and I can't find it, or I'm spending time trying to find it. So the document management system forces naming conventions and forces you to put a document in a place that it's logically going to be found. When we did that, we also turned off the ability with Active Directory to save locally. So you just didn't have a choice. You had to do it. So there, you lock them out. There's different things that you can do ultimately.
So everything you said there makes a ton of sense. So when you design a system like this and when you implement the system, and you might have answered this before, if you did, I'm sorry. How long does it take to actually implement something like that? And how much training does someone actually have to go through to fully understand how to use that new system or process? Yeah.
So when I was at Verizon, part of my job at one point at time was dealing with this kind of issue. Verizon was sort of well known for, I worked for a company called Alltel first, and they were sort of a little acquisition heavy cell phone company for a long period of time, bought little cell phone carriers over time. So I was sort of used to this process, and Verizon did the same thing when they bought Alltel. So the traditional best practice is to leave both systems open for a period of time for the transition to occur, right? Because and I can give you kind of how we're doing this in the real world today. It's actively happening behind the scenes right now. So we have two different practice management systems. One's called ProLaw and one's called Amicus. Amicus is ultimately going to be the system of record for the firm as a whole. So obviously there's a data migration project that's going to happen, and that's the piece that's being worked on now. So we're going to suck all the data from ProLaw into Amicus so that Amicus has all the same data, but we're going to put ProLaw into a read-only mode for probably 12 months, right? So that people, in the event they need something in there that just didn't get sucked into World Docs or to Amicus successfully, or can't find it for some reason, or there's some weirdness with it, they'll be able to get it into ProLaw, but they won't be able to add new information, right? So that's kind of step one on that. It kind of locks that database in time so that it can't be changed, and we aren't having people sort of sneaking using some piece of software that they shouldn't be. And then, after about 3 or 4 months, I'll probably turn off ProLaw and see what kind of noise I hear. If I don't hear any noise, then it's going to get basically archived, shelved, and done. If I hear some noise, then I'm going to say, well, what are you using it for? It's been dead for 6 months. what is in there that you can't get from something else? And if they say, well, the only place that, and it shocks me every time, we've been talking about this forever, and then I'll hear about some weird thing that never got transitioned over. And inevitably, it'll be the first time that I've ever heard of this problem. So then we'll have to solve for that and figure out how we're going to get that data in, or are we going to leave it open? But I think being flexible is key, but putting enough roadblocks in place that the way that they did it before doesn't exist. That's really the key. Because if you just leave everything live and open and ask them to save things into the new program, you're going to be really disappointed. You have to be able to let them see it because that's their job, and you don't want to get in the way of actually letting them do the job, but you want to put in enough roadblocks that it's really just much easier to do the system that you want them to do.
Got it. No, that makes sense. So circling back to the office question a little bit from before, we still are facing this COVID crisis and things have changed a little bit. And from what I saw on LinkedIn earlier today, it looks like the merger occurred or is finalized, sometime in January. So
right.
How has, your office been affected by COVID-19? Have you had to add a virtual component or a remote component to the office at all?
Yeah. So a good question. So I was always sort of a big proponent of virtualization, server virtualization, desktop virtualization, and really making it so that the job could be done from anywhere. Weirdly, I wasn't a fan of at-home work. Even though I pushed that, I was not. When requests to me came to work from home, I usually pushed back on them or just denied them, with a few exceptions. I have changed my stance on that pretty significantly and probably done as close to a 180 as you can do on it, for a couple reasons. One, at the same time that I was, I guess if I'm unpacking it while I'm talking about it, I hadn't really thought about it in this way, but I spent a lot of time and the firm has spent a lot of money building out a space that I just could not imagine people not coming into. Just conceptually, I couldn't wrap my head around the fact that we would pay all this money and not have people in their seats all day long doing their job. Right. So that was kind of one piece of it. Two, the other piece of it really was just making sure that data was safe, for lack of a better word, in an outside location. Right. We were dealing with just as much sensitive information as a CPA firm or most other professional services firms. And, it's outside my eyes, even though people can be stealing information right in front of you. It's just still, the concept is they're not, because they're physically here, right? And what COVID-19 did for us, or me, was really open my eyes to the fact that we can have a successful outside remote workforce. And once I saw that really was possible and is possible, then I sort of went all into it. So we advanced our planning on remote desktop, and we are in the midst of a large-scale project to move all of our servers to a virtualized environment and all of our desktops to a virtualized environment. So what that means is that users, regardless of where they're located, whether it's in this state, another country, wherever they are, will have the exact same protocols and exact same systems that somebody that's physically present. So even when you're physically present in the office, you will be in a virtualized environment. You'll have basically either a laptop if you're an attorney that's going to court a lot, or you'll have basically a terminal that is talking to the remote desktop, and that is where all of your work will live. That solved for me a lot of problems with it because it allowed us to have the data security that was really important to me. And it allowed for us to equalize the playing field for employees that are working from home and not working from home. And it solved a big real estate problem for me because in our new space, the new space that we're building out, this 20,000 square feet space that I talked about, we were already talking about an option on another floor that we had and executing that option. So we were going to be looking at 40,000 square feet, because I have some really aggressive growth plans and some really aggressive plans to bring on some additional practice areas that don't exist now or expand those practice areas. And we needed places to do that. We only had about 20% vacancy in our new space, and that wasn't enough clearly for our growth. The building that we're in now, we've expanded this space 3 times. And so that was just, I didn't want to do that again. I wanted to be the space that we could be and then just grow into it. Now, I don't have any plans to execute those options. What we did do is basically work with our architect to make some changes to everything, and then make some changes to the conference rooms, make some changes to, all of that, and then really make it more of a support space for us so that all of our staff, whether they're working remotely or working in the office, are supported from HQ, so to speak. And, that's where we'll have all of our big conference rooms and our depositions and things like that can happen there. So it really changed the way that I looked at it kind of a lot, actually.
So the new space then that you're building out, is it more of like would you almost kind of categorize it as like a shared office type environment versus a home base office?
Yeah, I would still call it home base, but what we did do is we embraced sort of a hoteling concept, which is, cool. There'll be a series of offices that are open that don't have anybody assigned to them, and they have a docking station, and that person can dock in that environment. They can check out the room just like they would a conference room, and that'll be their office or cubicle for the day, depending on where they need to work. And so that was new. That was not in our plans originally at all.
That's great. And with the remote workforce now, did you have to change what you hold your employees accountable to at all, or what do you hold remote workers to?
Same standards as here. So if you're remote and you want to be a remote worker, I don't really think we're going to change standards much at all. And that remains to be seen. I mean, maybe there'll be some adjustments that need to happen over time to somebody's productivity, but I haven't yet seen a reason to change standards between the people. So if somebody's a remote worker or somebody's working here, it's the same job. And especially once we get all of the same equipment and the same procedures, basically, whether you're here or there, it really shouldn't be a difference.
And what do you hold your remote workers accountable to? Or I guess workers in general? What do you?
Well, it depends on their position, of course, but communication's key, whether you're in the office or outside the office. If you're outside the office, communication's probably even more key, right? Because I can't just physically walk over to you and say, hey, what are you working on? Are you getting this done for me? Mm-hmm. So they have to more regularly communicate about what's happening. That's a big deal. The other thing probably is really just having regular check-ins with them. For outside workers, you need to have some time set aside to kind of debrief with them, make sure things are working. If they're experiencing IT issues, you want to solve for them right away, because it's just, the more time that they're putzing around with this thing, the less time that they're actually able to, get the job done. So that's key.
Good stuff. All right. So switching gears a little bit, we ask everybody that comes on the show. What was a challenge that you experienced that was so painful, so awful, whatever other adjectives you would like to include there, just so bad that you almost said, you know what, I don't know if running a business is for me, and those W-2 jobs are starting to look pretty nice?
Probably just in generalities, the times that we have done this and we weren't on the same page with our acquisition partner, and probably that one that kind of fell apart. I mean, I can unpack that one and know kind of why that one did, and it's still hanging out there and might come back in the future, but that's always tough. And I think in that situation, I really, really, really wanted that one to work. I thought I saw so many positives, so to speak, of that, and didn't really pay attention to the negatives. It ultimately fell apart, and I'm glad that it did in the moments that it did. And if it comes back around, it'll probably come back around in a very different way. But that's tough because you spend a lot of time. These things are like your kids sometimes, and you're trying to make it, kind of mold it, make it happen. And, when it doesn't work, or you have to admit to yourself it's not going to work, that's when it's tough, I think. So probably then.
And if that does come back around, how would you approach it differently?
Well, I would absolutely say, hey, I'm happy that you're wanting to talk about it again. I think the same reasons I was excited about it in 2018 are the same reasons I'm excited today. If we're going to jump on a call, these are the 3 expectations that you need to know that I'm not budging on, basically, and lay out, before it even gets started, just say, these are what I need you to be ready to do. And almost always when these don't happen and they come back around, it's because they've now had more time to think about it, and the monumental shift in their minds has occurred, right? Or if we're in CPA world, it's telling the client that they need to file the return, I need your information. And then now it's like 2 days before filing deadline, right? They just somehow pop into your, they're here's everything you asked for. Can't you get it done by the end of the day kind of thing? That's sort of how these come back when they come back around. It's like, hey, we're ready to go. We've resolved all internal issues and things are great. It's like, probably not. Let's make sure that that's the case. And let's make sure that you understand this is where I'm at if I'm even going to pick up the phone and talk to you again about it.
What's so interesting about that is that, it's really just setting expectations, just setting super clear expectations and being transparent up front. And I know that Tom and I have talked about this numerous times. It's like that setting expectations, if you integrate that kind of core principle into your life, your personal relationships, your employees, your clients, just anything. It just makes everything a lot smoother because you're just putting out there, here's where I'm at, and here's what you can expect from me. Now let's have a conversation about it rather than figuring it out as you're kind of coming up to the closing table, if it even got that far. Good stuff.
Yeah. No, it's interesting. I mean, running a professional services firm or any business right now is a challenge, of course. Take COVID out of it, and it's still a challenge, right? And depending on the state that you're in, it's even more challenging because there's, every state's got their own little quirks or things that they do. But, at the end of the day, setting expectations and communications are the key to almost every relationship, whether it's at work or personal. And if you can do that in these scenarios, especially around the stuff that we've talked about, you're just going to be that much farther ahead. The last thing you want is to get halfway into something and it just explode because you both have been talking about two different things for the whole time, And you also want to make sure you have buy-in you don't necessarily need buy-in from their staff, but you certainly would want to endeavor to get it. For us, I've always been, when we've done these acquisitions or mergers and we've retained staff or brought staff over or whatnot, it's always been about how this is going to benefit them and how it's going to be better. And, it's going to suck for a while because there's going to be some transitions. You're going to have to learn new software, but ultimately at the end of the day, this is where we're going. And I'm really excited to have you as a part of it, kind of thing. And that usually works, and sometimes it doesn't. And when it doesn't work, you have to go back to the question Thomas asked, like, how do you lock them out of stuff? And how do you make them do what you want them to do, and all of that. And then at some point, that person's maybe not right for the new organization. And that's another realization that you'll have to make at some point with some of these people, and that's okay. There's a great job for them somewhere. It just may not be with you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So last question here. If you had to do it all over again, what would you have done differently?
It's a good question. It may have been around the amount of time that I wasted on being so against remote work. I think I probably could have expanded even more than we've done today, faster, and really opened up to it, which is interesting because which is weird. I can be extremely successful remotely. I can get everything done that I need to do. But I just thought for whatever reason that can't happen with somebody else other than myself or one of my partners or one of the attorneys, right? And that clearly isn't the case. I think they can do it. And I think they're proving that they're doing it every day.
Absolutely. So if our listeners wanted to learn more about you or get in touch with you, what would be the best way for them to do so?
Email is great. I'm on, feel free to reach out to me on our website, lagerlof.com. My bio is there. Send me a message through LinkedIn. I'm happy to do it. Give me a call. Happy to chat. I love talking about these issues and talking about things. I've kind of created a mini managing partner, managing director roundtable or think tank here locally with some of the main managing partners of firms similar in size to us or similar in kind of stature or practice areas. Love to add some people from outside the area to that because it's great when you're talking to things. I was just on a call yesterday with one of the managing partners of a large financial office of a financial institution. They have a 200-person office, and we have a monthly call just talking about things. And he was talking about, hey, I'm going to be sending out an email to my whole team, and it's going to get picked up by the whole market director to send out to 5,000 employees on best practices on Zoom, right, and how to do this or that. And we talked for like 20 minutes about some things that he could do to look good to his market director. And he sent me some things that he's going to use to tell his staff, and all that stuff's super valuable because that's something that wasn't even on my radar. I'm not even thinking about it. I'm dealing with all this merger stuff. And, I'm basically going to take what you write to your people, change the name of the company and send it out. So thank you for that type of thing. So those relationships can be really, really good. And I think I would encourage anybody that can develop that locally to do it. And if you're interested in being a part of one of those, let me know.
Awesome. Well, this was definitely an insightful interview. I want to thank you for taking the time to come on the show today, and we're looking forward to putting this out there.
Awesome. And me too. Thanks, guys.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed the show, leave us a review on iTunes and share the show with other business owners who may be facing their own growth challenges. And if you own a professional services firm, consider joining our private community. The Staying Power Collective is a community where owners of accounting, law, and consulting firms discuss best practices for running and growing virtual businesses. You'll get access to our Slack group, and you'll have a Zoom meeting once a month with a small group of other firm owners. To apply for the group, head on over to www.stayingpowercollective.com and fill out the brief form. And if you have suggestions for future topics or guests, or if you have general questions or feedback, send us an email at contact@stayingpowercollective.com. Thanks so much for listening, and have a great rest of your week.